Welcome to Charlie Brown's Kitchen. It's Tuesday, 16 April, and it's going to rain out in a little while. No, that's not why we're here. We're here because Charlie Brown wants meatloaf for dinner. Isn't that right, dude? Yeah. And Charlie Brown wants to show off the KitchenAid meat grinder. Isn't that right, dude? Yeah. That look interesting? Say hi to the audience, dude. No. So this is actually what you're looking at is this. The KitchenAid, what they call the metal food grinder. They don't call it a meat grinder. They call it the metal food grinder. It grinds more than meat, but guess what? They show meat on their box. You can make sausages and burgers and all kinds of stuff. And if you even look closely, you can put onions and all kinds of things in your meat and grind it together for whatever, sausages or whatever you're making. So today we're going to be using this to make meatloaf. So here's the business end of the grinder. And if the camera shows it, you can see there's a sharp blade spinning around in there that grinds and chops your meat. So, as some of you may know, I have an Amazon Fresh store conveniently located on my way home from work. Otherwise, I drive right by it every day on my way home. So, today I decided to get two very cheap cuts of meat. These are like $6 a pound meat, as opposed to some people saying filet mignon is costing like $40 a pound. Well, this is on the other end of the spectrum of $6 a pound. Okay, and we've got some chuck roast and some round roast. Okay, chuck roast is from the front of the cow. Round roast is from the butt end of the cow. Okay, so we got the two ends that are going to meet in the grinder. So I took the meat out of their plastic casings, and you can see this meat is well marbled with fat. And it turns out this is exactly what we want. We actually want to grind the fat in with the meat because that makes very juicy burgers or anything you make. And the fat is only going to add to the taste or the outcome. However, they do say trim out big pieces of fat like this. What you want is the well marbled meat. And not these big hard fat chunks. So this is scrap, and we are going to cut the meat in the chunks, some maybe like 1-inch cubes for the grinder. And if you hear a whirring noise going on in the background, that is Charlie Brown's kitchen air conditioner. It decided to go to 80 degrees recently here in Chicagoland. And although I was joking when I said we're here to talk about the rain when I started, it is supposed to rain later today, all night long, and into tomorrow. So we'll be getting a good 24-hour rain soaking. And that's just stuff to chat about while you're chopping meat. I don't know what butchers talk about. Maybe they talk about the weather too, I don't know. Doesn't everybody talk about the weather? So this is going pretty fast. Of course, I've got my big ass meat cleaver in action here, although I'm not chopping per se with it. We're just cubing the meat. Okay, my meatloaf recipe calls for 2 pounds of beef, and that's pretty much probably what I'll have by the time I remove all this fat. A nice sharp, big, heavy knife just cuts right through this stuff. You can see this beef round is a little less fatty than the chuck, and that's also, now there's a zillion YouTube videos about this and grinding your own meat and using the KitchenAid grinder. There are a lot of videos out there in YouTube world, so you can watch those. But all the experts say, like, a 70-30 mix is what you want between the fatty meat and the higher quality meat. So there's our meat all diced up. Now I am also going to, well, maybe these chucks are a little bit big. I'll put these. I'm also going to dice up an onion and grind the onion at the same time I'm grinding the meat. So I have some onion and garlic here, called for in my meatloaf recipe, that I am only going to basically rough chop and let the grinder kind of do its thing and grind up the onion and garlic. Okay, so there you go. We got our meat, onion, and garlic ready to go into our grinder. And this would make a tasty hamburger, but we are making meatloaf today. Okay, the KitchenAid grinder comes with I kind of shove it in the hole stick, but they basically say let gravity do most of the work and try not to jam too much in. So we are going to pre-fill our meat and onion into a little hopper here. Okay, so I put some meat, onion, and garlic in the hopper here, and they say this grinder is best operated at a speed of 4. Just a note to self, the meat cubes I made are kind of big, so I'm kind of having to shove them in there. I guess it's better to have smaller cubes and things will kind of go in there more naturally. But everything is working. I just turned off the grinder to let you know what's going on. So, looks like we're done. We ground up about 2 pounds of beef and an onion and some garlic. And we got this nice aromatic mix of now ground beef here. It actually smells very wonderful. So our meatloaf recipe today comes from the American Meat Association or something like that. Go figure, they're pushing meat. And it calls for 2 cups of panko breadcrumbs, 1 cup of milk, a couple of eggs, which I am going to crack open and whip up here. So at this point it's going to look a little bit like we're making scrambled eggs, but the eggs and the milk serve as the glue that holds the meatloaf together. So we'll add our 1 cup of milk. We'll add our, it does call for kosher salt, so we're going to add our kosher salt, and we're going to add our pepper, So in another recipe, we would be making some kind of scrambled egg recipe, but we're making meatloaf today. Okay, so this is where it gets a little interesting. We are going to put our egg mixture on top of the meat here. And then we are going to dump this back into this big bowl so we could mix it up, incorporate all the ingredients together. That's looking good, so now we'll toss in our 2 cups of breadcrumbs. Mix this up. Now the breadcrumbs and the other fillers in the meatloaf were a way of extending the meat. But today, I just like them, and they just simply add flavor to the meatloaf. Now keep in mind we ground up a whole onion and some garlic in with the meat. And this is fresh ground beef. You just saw us grind it. Okay. So now guess what happens. If you thought the next step was to put our ground meat mixture into a 13x9 pan, you're correct. But the interesting part here is, notice we're putting it into a 13x9 pan lined with plastic wrap, because we are not going to bake our meatloaf in this pan. We are going to refrigerate it. That's the twist here. So we're going to put our meat mix in here and refrigerate it. Kind of play neat, or I can just use my hands. Sometimes your hands are your best tools while baking and cooking. Now, they really want you to pack this meatloaf meat mix very tight into this pan. And we are going to refrigerate it for 15-20 minutes to solidify it into a shape. And why all that is coming up later in this video. But our first step is to pack our 2 pounds of meatloaf mix with onions and garlic and eggs and breadcrumbs. I want you to really slam it in and pack this tight. So you're right, we are forming the loaf shape. But we are going to harden it in the refrigerator. And that is probably my soup. Our meatloaf has been in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes. And the recipe calls for us to actually cook it on this pan. So the trick is to flip this out. Came out clean out of this pan. Remove the plastic wrap. There's our meatloaf. Now what they want you to do is coat it. Actually, what they wanted you to do is coat it with a mustard and ketchup mix. But I've substituted a brown sugar and honey mix, kind of like glazed ham. So we are going to coat the meatloaf with our honey glaze and steak sauce. I should mention I mix honey with A1 steak sauce here. It tastes good, I mean, just in the bowl. So, not so weird. So we are coating our meatloaf with our honey mix. We've got our oven preheated to 350 degrees. And once we put it in the oven, it has to bake in the oven for about an hour. So, I personally do not like meatloaf recipes with ketchup, even though that's pretty popular. So I avoided the ketchup in this recipe and the mustard seeds, and we're using brown sugar, honey, and A1 steak sauce to coat our meatloaf. So, time has come to put this in the oven and wait an hour and see what happens. So my meatloaf just finished baking for about an hour at 350 degrees, and while it was in there I threw in a couple of baked potatoes to bake. So my favorite dinner is meatloaf and baked potatoes. And no, I'm not going to put ketchup on it. I'm going to put steak sauce on it when I eat it. So let's cut into it and have a look. It's looking really good. It's not dry. It's nice and moist. So you can see it there. It's still hot. That is one very tasty meatloaf. Big thumbs up on this. I have to let it cool a little because it's still very hot, but it's very tasty.